Hello cruel world, my name is Dr. 𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐡 𝐅𝐨𝐫 I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. So today I'm going to do my critique of Will Smith's apology video. I'm sure you all know the background, him slapping Chris Rock, etc, etc. I'm not going to get into that. This video is going to be me analysing the sincerity of Will Smith's apology, and at some point I'm going to throw in my kind of explanation of my understanding of what actually happened and why he hit Chris Rock. Let's get started on the video. I should say that I'm going to put the link for the video in case you haven't seen it in the descriptions.
Why didn't you apologize to Chris in your acceptance speech? I was fogged out by that point. It's all fuzzy. I've reached out to Chris, and the message that came back is that he's not ready to talk, and when he is, he will reach out.
Okay, so I'm not sure that Will Smith used the best choice of words here. He said fuzzy, fogged out. I think what he really means is that he was really tense, distressed, upset, disturbed, angry in that moment. And in his mind, he must have thought that the slap was justified. I don't think he thinks that now, but he thought that at that point. So I think that's quite reasonable. I think all of you watching this, you must have had arguments with people at some time. I'm sure we've all sent an angry email and then regretted it, but it takes a while. It takes a while for all of that to sink in. It's very unusual. I'd say it's so rare that it's almost impossible for somebody to be that angry and have the presence of mind to regret their actions immediately. So I guess what I'm saying is I think that's quite reasonable. Like, I think him having digested it and thought over it and then apologizing actually is more sincere, like he's doing now, than just as a reaction saying sorry immediately after it happened. So I've got to say I've got no beef with him saying this at that point.
So I will say to you, Chris, I apologize to you. My behavior was unacceptable, and I'm here whenever you're ready to talk. I want to apologize to Chris's mother. I saw an interview that Chris's mother did, and you know, that was one of the things about that moment. I just didn't realize, and you know, I wasn't thinking, but how many people got hurt in that moment.
So I've not seen this video all the way through. I've seen tiny little bits of it. And I have to say, so far, it seems pretty sincere. Like, he actually seems quite upset, and he's saying, you know, unreservedly, very directly and very clearly that he's taking full responsibility. He's not trying to make any excuses at this point. I don't know if he will later. So yeah, so far, so good. Checks out to me. Let's continue.
So I want to apologize to Chris's mother. I want to apologize to Chris's family, specifically Tony Rock. You know, we had a great relationship. You know, Tony Rock was my man, and this is probably irreparable. So,
to me, the very fact that Will Smith is thinking about not just Chris Rock but also the wider circle, his family, his brother, it sounds like somebody who's actually digested and really thought about it. It's not somebody, to me, who's just sort of saying sorry because he feels under pressure to say sorry. He's obviously thought about the knock-on effects and the consequences. And the other thing is that I think it might often get kind of forgotten in this kind of scenario, is that they will know a lot of people in common. They will have a lot of friends in common. They're both like huge Hollywood black American stars, so they must roll with at least some of the same people or meet the same people at award shows, blah blah blah. So there is a knock-on effect. It's not just like this happened in a vacuum. It must have affected his relationships and his friendships with so many different people, and I think it sounds like he's considered that. So I think that's all reasonable so far.
I spent the last 3 months replaying and understanding the nuances and the complexities of what happened in that moment. And I'm not going to try to unpack all of that right now, but I can say to all of you, there is no part of me that thinks that was the right way to behave in that moment. There's no part of me that thinks that's the optimal way to handle a feeling of disrespect or insults.
I mean, I don't know what else to say apart from what I've already said. It seems really sincere to me. He's unreservedly apologizing. He's not like trying to justify it low key, as lots of people do when they pseudo apologize because they feel they have to. He's taken full responsibility as far as I can tell. I've seen a couple of other YouTube videos that don't agree with that and say that he's kind of held back a little bit and he's not fully remorseful. Unless something changes in the next couple of minutes, I cannot agree with that. Let's continue.
After Jada rolled her eyes, did she tell you to do something? No. It's like, I made a choice on my own, from my own experiences, from my history with Chris. Jada had nothing to do with it. I'm sorry, babe. I'm gonna say sorry to my kids and my family for the heat that I brought on all of us.
So yeah, I've heard this kind of theory in various YouTube articles, YouTube videos. I've even seen it in some of the comments in my previous video. And a lot of people are suggesting that Will Smith either was directly bullied or pressurized by Jada, either directly before the event or as it happened. So he laughed initially, then he looked at her, she either by a roll of her eyes or directly said that he had to go and do something. I don't believe that to be the case, and I'll tell you why. I fully admit they have a complicated relationship and she's definitely done things that have hurt his feelings. But Will Smith is a very independent, very confident man who has spent his life making quite direct decisions and doing things that are quite sort of brave and that other people wouldn't have the ethics or the work ethic or the moral kind of compass behind them. So I guess my point is, I don't think he needs Jada as a reason to do what he did. I think there is a reason that he did what he did, which I've dissected in my previous video. I might get into it in this video depending on what Will says. But I don't think that he was pressurized to do it by her. I don't think it needed to be like that. I think he's confident enough in his emotions and his reactions, even though that was the wrong thing to do, for him to have made this decision himself. So I believe that personally.
To all my fellow nominees, this is a community. It's like I won because you voted for me. And it really breaks my heart to have stolen and tarnished your moment. I can still see Questlove's eyes. It happened on Questlove's award. And, it's like I'm sorry really isn't sufficient.
I think what Will Smith is trying to say is that it always seems to me that sorry seems to be the hardest word, as the wise philosopher's Blue featuring Elton John once said. No, but joking aside, I think he really means it. I think this is a sincere remorse because he's obviously thought about the knock-on effects of other people, including his own family, because they would be embarrassed and there'd be a lot of chat and attention through the internet or in real life about what happened to his wife and to his kids. He mentioned Questlove and all the other people that were involved, not directly, but they were affected, I should say, by that incident. So he's obviously thought about it. This, again, it doesn't strike me as somebody who is just apologizing for the sake of it. He's actually taken some time to think about the knock-on effects of his actions. So again, sorry for repeating myself, but I can't see this as anything but sincere as of now, unless something changes.
What would you say to the people who looked up to you before the slap, or people who expressed that you let them down? So there's two things. One, disappointing people is my central trauma. I hate when I let people down.
So yeah, I've done this in more detail in a previous video and we'll put the link, so I won't go into all of it now, but I really like Will Smith and I'm trying to make this as objective as possible. I'm trying to take my own personal feelings about him out of this and trying to do this as objectively as possible from the perspective of a psychiatrist. So I think there's very specific, they're not excuses, but they're explanations of why Will Smith acted like he did when he slapped Chris Rock. So I happen to have read Will Smith's autobiography finished it literally about a week before the incident happened. So it's all very fresh in my mind, it's just a coincidence. And one of the things that he talks about very openly is that he is massively ashamed of himself because his alcoholic father was abusive towards his mother, and Will Smith didn't really do anything physically to stop that. His way of trying to control the situation was to placate his father by being the funny one, being jovial, and his own younger brother physically used to stop the abuse and was kind of ashamed of Will Smith for not doing that. So Will Smith has always had this massive inferiority complex. And what he says is absolutely true. There's this theme that goes through his autobiography, which obviously was written before the slap, of disappointing people and of having to do this image and of not protecting women in his family. So I think that's one of the main reasons that he massively overreacted when he perceived Jada to be insulted. But let's face it wasn't that bad of an insult. Plus, and again, I'll go into this in more detail, Chris Rock insulted Jada quite heavily previously in 2016, I believe it was, the comment about Rihanna's panties. But it seemed quite personal because Chris Rock was attacking something that Jada and Will had a very strong political views about. And crucially, he only really attacked them. He wasn't like 𝐏𝐸𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡 just sort of insulting loads of celebrities and it was all a big sort of like comedy skit. It wasn't that, it was just a personal attack. So I think that Will Smith held on to that, was embarrassed and ashamed that he didn't do anything about it at that time when Chris Rock made those jokes because he wasn't expecting it. So I think he was primed recently to slap Chris Rock when he made those comments. So these are some of the reasons I think that are all connected, and this is also reflected by what Will Smith has just said about disappointing people. So it's all kind of makes sense from a psychoanalysis point of view. I'm not saying for a second that I'm justifying his actions before all you trolls start getting angry at me. Absolutely, he should not have done what he did. He's acknowledging that now. I'm just saying that when you look at his background, it makes sense to understand why he reacted like he did.
So it hurts. It hurts me psychologically and emotionally to know I didn't live up to people's image and impression of me. And the work I'm trying to do is I am deeply remorseful, and I'm trying to be remorseful without being ashamed of myself, right? I'm human, and I made a mistake.
So I kind of made a face there because despite everything I've just said, I'm not sure that was the right turn of phrase. So he said he wants to be remorseful but not being ashamed of himself. I think if he means not being ashamed of what he did, then I have to say that's the first glitch in the armor for me. He should be ashamed of what he did. But I think he's just not expressed it very well. I think he's saying he's ashamed and embarrassed of what he did, but he's trying not to be ashamed of himself as a person, which I think is quite honest. It's a bit ballsy for this kind of apology, but I think that's reasonable.
And I'm trying not to think of myself as a piece of shit. So I would say to those people, I know it was confusing. I know it was shocking.
I think, to be fair, I don't think he is a piece of shit. I think he did one impulsive thing that was completely wrong, and obviously it's going to be something he's associated with, and it's going to be a mark on his character. But if you look at his whole personality, the way he's lived his life, his absolute determination, I don't think he's a piece of shit. I think it's fair for him to not think of himself or call himself that, and I don't think other people should be thinking of him like that. I think that would be unfair.
But I promise you, I am deeply devoted and committed to putting light and love and joy into the world. And, you know, if you hang on, I promise we'll be able to be friends again.
So just to summarize, I genuinely think this is a remorseful apology. I think he's telling the truth about the way he feels, how embarrassed he is about it, and about him not being under the direct influence of Jada. Maybe there's an indirect influence because of his hang-ups and his insecurities about not protecting women in his life, but I'm talking about direct influence. Now, it's possible that it's all a fraud and everything he says is not true. I don't think that's the case, and I'll explain why. Having read his autobiography, Will Smith was very open about some things that the average person would be embarrassed and ashamed about, including, you know, not being there for standing up for his mother. So it doesn't make sense to me that somebody that's that open, and he's pretty open in his own YouTube channel, videos he's made, when he's talked about his like previous attitude, blowing money recklessly, blah, blah, blah. So that doesn't make sense to me that somebody would be that kind of honest and open in that scenario, but have this like hidden agenda and be lying in this scenario. As I said, it's not impossible. I think there's a 1% chance he's faking it. To me, 99% chance that he is telling the truth, and he's fully remorseful for this. So those are my thoughts. I've tried to make this video as objective as possible. I do like Will Smith. I love his outlook on life. If you read his autobiography, right from day one, he was determined to do something, which was make it in rap. Did everything he needed to do, sometimes against his own peers, lost friends doing it, got into physical fights because of it. And then when he finally made it over to the small screen, then the big screen, he had this huge, really respectable work ethic. Kind of reminds me of Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, in terms of their mindset. So I've tried to make this objective. There's very little wrong that I can say about his apology. Maybe he used the wrong terminology. Fuzzy, fogged out is not a great way of saying it, but you know, this isn't a planned speech. This is him reacting to questions. I suppose the other thing that occurred to me is you could argue that he's not really explained his actions, but the counter argument of that would be, number one, that wasn't one of the questions that was asked to him. Nobody of the questions that he chose to answer, nobody said, why did you do it? And number two, I don't think it's possible for him to try and justify what was going on through his head during an apology without it taking away from the apology. Because no matter how sort of regretful or remorseful he's being, it's going to come across like he's trying to low-key, sort of backdoor, sneakily justify his actions. So I think it's fair enough that he hasn't discussed this now during his apology. I hope, and I'd like to think that eventually at some point he will talk about it in more detail. So those are my thoughts on Will Smith's apology. Let me know if you think I've got it completely right, completely wrong. Let me know in the comment section below. As I said, I've done a longer video of my psychoanalysis of what actually happened and the reasons for the slap. I've given you a little taste of that, but I go into a lot more detail in my other video in the comments below. If you like these kind of videos, me reacting to like high profile cases, you got to go check out my recent one about Joe Biden. Does he have dementia? Jimmy Savile, R. Kelly, all of these people. Check him out in the links. Have a blessed day. Stay 𝐬𝐨𝐽𝐼c, and do not forget, I love you.